London, 1842. It is a curious truth of London society that disgrace rarely arrives with raised voices. More often it comes softly, poured into porcelain cups during afternoon tea, wrapped in politeness, and delivered by those who claim to love you most. Lady Eleanor Whitcomb learned this truth the night her family decided she was no longer worth defending. By morning, the decision had become silence. She left her family home before dawn, precisely because no one thought to stop her. The lamps along the corridor flickered weakly as she passed, their dim glow revealing portraits of ancestors who had never smiled kindly upon her, even in oil and guilt. They watched her go with the same cold judgment they had worn the evening before, when her former fiancé's betrayal had been discussed not with outrage, but with calculation. Reputations had been preserved, just not hers. Lady Eleanor walked quietly, a small travelling case clasped in one trembling hand. She wore no jewels, no escort followed, no maid whispered reassurances behind her. Only dignity accompanied her, bruised but stubbornly alive. Society would later say she fled in shame. They would be wrong. Lady Eleanor did not flee. She was released. Outside the iron gates, London slept beneath a veil of mist. The road stretched ahead, pale and uncertain, bordered by hedgerows heavy with dew. Eleanor paused for a moment, breathing in the cool air as though it might steady the ache lodged in her chest. She had loved once, or rather, she had believed herself loved. Her former fiancé had been charming, attentive, persuasive in all the ways men often are when they desire something. Promises had been made in quiet corners. Affection offered freely, until it was no longer convenient to claim her. When whispers of scandal arose, he had denied everything. And Eleanor, foolish girl that she had been, had told the truth. Her family did not thank her for it. They had looked at her as though she were something broken, something careless, something that had brought humiliation upon their name. She should have known better, her mother had said, lips tight with disappointment. She allowed herself to be ruined, her father had added, already calculating the social cost. No one had asked if she had been deceived. No one had asked if she had been frightened. No one had asked if her heart had been broken. Eleanor straightened her spine and stepped onto the road. If she was to be cast out, she would at least walk away, standing. The mist thickened as she went, curling low around her skirts like secrets unwilling to rise too quickly. Her eyes burned, not merely from the cold, but from the tears she refused to shed again. She had cried enough for one lifetime. It was there, between propriety and exile, that fate intervened. Hooves sounded against gravel. Eleanor did not turn. A woman recently humiliated learns quickly that attention is rarely kind. The sound grew closer, measured and unhurried, as though whoever approached had nowhere else to be, and all the time in the world to arrive. "The carriage will stop," a man's voice said calmly. Another voice answered, lower, amused. "She's alone. And after last night," the first replied. "That makes her vulnerable." Eleanor's grip tightened on her case. The carriage slowed beside her, its wheels whispering against the damp road. Even without looking, she knew what it was. Black, imposing, expensive, ducal. The crest on its door glinted faintly through the mist, a symbol of power that required no introduction. The door opened. A man stepped down with the ease of someone accustomed to commanding rooms without effort. He was tall, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, his expression composed in a way that suggested he had already decided the outcome of this encounter. "You should not be walking alone," he said gently, "not after what occurred." Eleanor lifted her chin. "I assure you, sir," she replied coolly, "I have endured far worse in drawing rooms." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "Indeed," he said, "which is precisely why I have stopped." She studied him now, his tailored coat, the confidence in his stance, the faint humor resting at the corner of his mouth. "And who," she asked, Might you be to involve yourself in my misfortune?" He inclined his head slightly. "Alexander Blackwood," he said. "Duke of Ravensford!" The name struck her like a bell. A duke, of course it was a duke, because humiliation, it seemed, was never content to arrive alone. "And what," Eleanor asked carefully, "does a duke want with a woman everyone else has so thoroughly discarded?" The Duke of Ravensford regarded her for a moment longer than politeness required. "I have observed you," he said at last, "for some time." Her breath caught. "Not in the way you are imagining," he added smoothly, one brow lifting, "though I see now why you would." Despite herself, Eleanor let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Forgive me if I decline to be reassured." A smile, quick and genuine, crossed his face. "I deserve that," he admitted. "Nevertheless, I believe your family has made a mistake." "They believe I made one first," Eleanor replied. "Perhaps," he said, "but society has always been remarkably forgiving of men and unforgiving of women who trust them." That surprised her. "You are unwell," he continued, his gaze sharpening, "cold, exhausted, and very much alone." She bristled. "I am perfectly capable of walking into ruin," he finished gently. "Yes, I see that." Eleanor opened her mouth to protest, then stopped, because she was tired. So terribly tired. "And what," she asked quietly, "do you propose instead?" He extended a gloved hand. "Come with me," he said, "at least for now." The mist swirled around them, thick and watchful. "This would be improper," Eleanor said. "Utterly," he agreed. A pause followed. Dangerous. Delicious. "And why," she whispered, "would you risk scandal for me?" His gaze softened, not with pity, but with certainty. "Because I am weary of a society that devours its most honest women," he said, "and because I have long suspected you deserved better than what you were given." Her heart stuttered. No one had ever said that to her before. Eleanor hesitated only a moment longer before placing her hand in his. The carriage door closed behind her with a decisive click. As it pulled away, Eleanor felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Hope, small, fragile, but alive. She did not yet know that this journey would test every belief she held about love, worth, and forgiveness. She did not yet know how difficult it would be to accept kindness after a lifetime of neglect. She only knew this. She had left home in silence, and for the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. The interior of a duke's carriage is not, as some would have you believe, merely a cushioned box for transporting arrogance from one address to another. It is a world. A private world, lined in dark velvet, warmed by a discreet foot-warmer, and scented faintly of cedar and something expensive Eleanor could not name. The kind of scent that implied its owner never had to worry about the price of comfort. Lady Eleanor Whitcomb sat very still, her small travelling case clutched in her lap, as if it were the last remaining proof she had not dreamed this entire thing. Across from her, the Duke of Ravensford had settled with infuriating ease, one arm resting along the seat as though rescuing disgraced women from roadsides was a minor inconvenience in his schedule, like stopping to purchase gloves. Eleanor cleared her throat, because silence was becoming dangerously intimate. "You said you have observed me," she began, choosing each word carefully. "For some time." "I did," he replied, eyes steady on hers. "That would imply," Eleanor continued, "that you have had ample opportunity to decide I am inconvenient." The Duke's mouth twitched, as though he found her word choice entertaining. "Inconvenient," he repeated. "Yes," she insisted. "A woman without a proper guardian at this hour. A woman with rumours." "Rumours," he echoed again, this time with a note of disdain. "Rumours are London's favourite sport." And yet, Eleanor said, you are carrying me directly into them. The Duke leaned back slightly, gaze sharpening. I'm carrying you away from a family who abandoned you, he corrected. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the handle of her case. My family did what they believed necessary. For themselves, he said simply. The words landed like a soft blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Eleanor looked out the window, watching the mist blur the hedgerows into pale shadows. I did not ask for rescue, she murmured. No, he agreed. You did not ask for much of anything. That is part of your trouble, Lady Eleanor. Her head snapped back toward him. My trouble. His brow lifted. You endure. Eleanor stared, uncertain whether to be offended or unsettled. I have had practice, she said coldly. I know. His voice softened, just a fraction. That is what angered me. Eleanor blinked. Angered you? Yes. He spoke as though it were obvious. A woman can be made to believe she deserves nothing, and she will walk out of her own home in silence rather than demand better. Eleanor's throat tightened. She hated him for seeing too much. She hated herself for being grateful. The carriage rolled onward, the soft creak of the wheels filling the pause between them. Eleanor tried to focus on breathing evenly, on the feel of the velvet seat beneath her, on the warmth of the foot warmer near her boots. Warmth. She had not realized how cold she had been until now. You have not asked where I am taking you, the Duke observed. I assumed, Eleanor replied, that if I asked, you would answer with something vague and irritating. A slow smile appeared. Accurate. Eleanor's lips twitched despite herself. An almost laugh, quickly swallowed. The Duke noticed anyway. Ah, he said. There she is. Eleanor frowned. Who? The woman with teeth, he answered. Not merely the polite ghost London prefers. Eleanor looked away again, because it was easier to hold her composure when she did not meet his eyes. The carriage turned off the main road, passing through iron gates guarded by lanterns and silence. Her drive stretched ahead, long and lined with bare winter trees, like watchful sentinels, Northbridge House. She recognized it at once. Not because she had ever been invited, but because London spoke of it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for cathedrals. The Duke of Ravensford's London residence? Eleanor's stomach dropped. This is my house, he finished, as if she had said nothing at all. Eleanor's hands tightened on her case. This is entirely impossible. It is already happening, he replied. I cannot be here, she insisted. Do you understand what people will say? The Duke's gaze turned sharp. I understand precisely what people will say, he said, which is why I have arranged it. Eleanor's breath caught. Arranged it, she repeated. He tapped his gloved fingers lightly against the seat. You are not my mistress, Lady Eleanor, he said, as though reading her panic. Nor will you be treated as one. Eleanor's cheeks burned, mortified that the thought had even flashed through her mind. He continued calmly, You are a guest, for as long as you require protection. Protection from what? Eleanor asked, voice smaller than she intended. The Duke's expression darkened. From the men who will assume your humiliation makes you available, he said. From the women who will assume your disgrace makes you prey. From your family, who may decide they would like to retrieve you only after they see what you might become without them. Eleanor's throat tightened again. She looked down at her hands, at the faint tremble she could not quite control. What do you want in return? She asked quietly. The Duke's gaze held hers. Honesty, he said, and patience. Eleanor's laugh was breathless, disbelieving. I have very little of either left. Then I will lend you mine, he replied. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door with smooth efficiency, his posture impeccable, his gaze carefully neutral, as though welcoming ruined ladies into a duke's home before breakfast was not remotely noteworthy. Eleanor stepped down, her boots meeting the stone drive. The cold air hit her cheeks like a slap, and she swayed slightly. The Duke's hand was at her elbow instantly, steadying her as though he had been expecting it. "You are weak," he murmured. "I am fine," Eleanor insisted, mortified. He glanced at her with something dangerously close to amusement. A woman who has been awake all night, crying, walking through mist at dawn, and being transported into scandal by a duke, is not fine. Eleanor opened her mouth, then shut it again, because he was correct. Inside, Northbridge House was all warmth and quiet elegance, polished wood, soft rugs, and the faint crackle of a fire somewhere deeper in the home. Servants moved like shadows, silent, efficient, and startlingly respectful. No one stared, no one whispered, no one looked at Eleanor as if she were something shameful. A housekeeper approached, a woman with grey hair pulled into a neat bun, her eyes kind but sharp. "My lord," she said, dipping a curtsy. "Mrs. Dalrymple," the Duke replied. "This is Lady Eleanor Whitcomb. She will be staying with us." Mrs. Dalrymple's gaze flicked to Eleanor, warm, assessing, and then she offered a soft smile. "Welcome to Northbridge House, my lady," she said, as though Eleanor belonged here. "You must be exhausted." Eleanor nearly crumpled at the simple kindness of it. The Duke seemed to notice because his hand tightened at her elbow. "See to her," he said quietly. "Of course," Mrs. Dalrymple replied. "A bath will be prepared, and something warm to drink. Perhaps broth." Eleanor's lips parted. Broth, as though she were ill, as though she mattered. The Duke turned slightly toward Eleanor. "You will rest," he said. That was not a suggestion," he added, voice mild but immovable. Eleanor stared at him, stunned by the authority of it. Then, because exhaustion makes rebels out of even the most polite women, she lifted her chin and said, "You cannot order me." His eyes gleamed. "Would you prefer I beg?" he asked softly. Eleanor froze. Because the image of the Duke of Ravensford begging was absurd enough to nearly make her laugh, and intimate enough to make her pulse stutter, she narrowed her eyes. "You are enjoying this?" "A little," he admitted. Eleanor huffed, an undignified sound that startled her more than anyone. The Duke's mouth curved. "There," he murmured. "Proof you are alive." Mrs. Dalrymple cleared her throat in a way that suggested she had seen stranger things than this and survived them all. "If you will come with me, my lady," she said gently. Eleanor followed, her steps unsteady. Up a grand staircase, down a corridor lined with paintings and gilded frames, into a guest room that looked like something from a dream. A fire crackled in the hearth. Curtains framed tall windows. A bed sat draped in pale linen, inviting sleep like a promise. Eleanor stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. "This is too much," she whispered. Mrs. Dalrymple touched her arm softly. "It is what you deserve, my lady," she said. Eleanor blinked rapidly, because the sting in her eyes returned. "I don't—" she began. Mrs. Dalrymple's gaze sharpened, kindly but firm. "We do not speak that way in this house," she said. "Not about ourselves." Eleanor's breath caught, "in this house," as though she belonged. A maid arrived with hot water and towels, another with tea and broth, as promised. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking slightly as she lifted the cup. The warmth hit her throat and travelled down into her chest, loosening something tight inside her. For the first time since last night, she felt safe, until her body betrayed her. A sharp chill ran through her. Her skin prickled, her head spun. Eleanor swayed, clutching the cup so tightly the tea sloshed. "My lady," the maid asked, alarmed. Eleanor tried to answer, but the room tilted. The warmth from the fire suddenly felt too distant. She set the cup down with trembling hands. "I'm only tired," she whispered, but her teeth began to chatter. Mrs. Dalrymple's expression shifted instantly, professional and concerned. "Fetch the Duke," she ordered. Eleanor's eyes widened. "No," she breathed. "Please, don't." But footsteps were already rushing away. Eleanor sat rigidly, humiliated anew, not by gossip this time, but by weakness. She had always been taught that to need care was to be burdensome, and now she was in a duke's house, shivering like a child, proving every terrible thing her family had ever implied. The door opened, not a servant this time. The Duke of Ravensford entered with quick, controlled steps, his expression sharper than she had yet seen it. He took one look at Eleanor, pale, trembling, eyes too bright, and swore under his breath. It was not a refined oath, it was not a polite one, and it was, oddly, the most comforting thing Eleanor had heard all day. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling in front of her as though rank meant nothing when a woman was suffering. "Eleanor," he said, using her given name as if he had earned it. "Look at me." She tried, but her lashes fluttered. "I'm fine," she whispered automatically. His gaze darkened. "You are not," he said quietly, "and you are not leaving again." Eleanor's breath caught. Something in his voice made the words sound less like an order, and more like a vow. And then the chill hit her harder, sweeping through her body. Eleanor's vision blurred. The last thing she felt was the Duke's hand closing firmly around hers, warm, steady, unafraid, before the room dissolved into darkness. And somewhere beyond the door, in the halls of Northbridge House, a servant's voice whispered urgently, "My lord, there is a visitor." Lady Eleanor Whitcomb did not awaken gently. She surfaced from darkness in fragments, heat, pressure, the scent of herbs, and a firm voice arguing with someone just beyond her reach. "No," the voice said, "she will not be moved." A pause. "I do not care who is waiting." Another pause, shorter, sharper. "She is under my roof." Eleanor tried to open her eyes. Her lashes fluttered, protested, then finally obeyed. Light greeted her first, the soft, honeyed glow of afternoon slipping through half-drawn curtains. Then came the ceiling above her, unfamiliar and elegant, followed by the unmistakable sensation of being tucked far too securely into bed. She inhaled warmth, clean linen, something bitter and medicinal lingering in the air. She turned her head slightly and froze. The Duke of Ravensford sat beside her bed, not standing at a polite distance, not summoning servants, sitting. One elbow braced on his knee, coat discarded, sleeves rolled with careless defiance of propriety. His dark hair was less precise than before, as though worry had tugged at it without permission. He was watching her, not observing, watching. Eleanor swallowed. Her throat burned. "I appear," she croaked, "to have inconvenienced you." His shoulders eased just a fraction. "Welcome back," he said quietly, "and no, you appear to have frightened me." Her brows drew together. "You?" "Yes," he replied simply. "Me." Eleanor shifted, then winced as her head protested. He was on his feet instantly, one hand hovering near her shoulder, careful not to touch without invitation. "Do not," he warned gently. "You fainted." "How dramatic," she murmured. His mouth twitched. "You collapsed." "That is far less poetic." He almost smiled. A woman entered then, older, sharp-eyed, carrying a tray with practiced authority. "The physician," Eleanor realized belatedly. "Ah," the woman said briskly, "she wakes." "She does," the Duke confirmed. "Explain." The physician did not bother with ceremony. Exhaustion, exposure, fever beginning to rise, emotional shock. Eleanor grimaced. "I sound terribly fragile." The physician snorted. "You sound human." The Duke folded his arms. "What does she require?" "Rest," the woman replied. "Warmth, no stress, and someone to ensure she does not attempt another noble escape before she can stand." Eleanor opened her mouth to object. The Duke spoke first. "I will see to it." The physician gave him a long, measuring look, then nodded once. "Good," she said. "Because if she leaves this bed before morning, I will personally return to scold you." When they were alone again, Eleanor stared at the canopy above her. "I dislike causing trouble," she said quietly. "You are not causing trouble," he replied. "You are revealing it." She turned toward him. "That is worse." His gaze softened. "Yes," he said, "but also more honest." Silence settled between them. Comfortable, surprisingly so. Eleanor became aware, slowly, of other details. A chair pulled close, a book set aside, a glass of water waiting at her reach. "You stayed," she said, not quite believing it. "I did. You could have left." "I could not." Her heart did something treacherous. "Why?" she asked. He hesitated, just long enough to matter. "Because," he said carefully, "when a woman collapses under the weight of being dismissed her entire life, someone ought to stand guard while she learns how to breathe again." Eleanor's eyes stung. She turned away quickly, embarrassed by the sudden rush of emotion. "I'm not accustomed to being guarded," she whispered. "I know," he replied. She looked back. "You know?" "Yes. How?" He leaned back slightly, giving her space without retreating. "I have watched you endure neglect with grace," he said. "You speak politely when you should rage. You apologize when you should demand. You leave quietly when others should be ashamed." Her chest tightened. "I thought no one noticed," she said. His voice lowered. "That is what frightened me." A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Dalrymple entered, carrying folded garments, soft, tasteful, unmistakably new. "For when you wake fully, my lady," she said kindly. Eleanor's eyes widened. "These are yours?" the Duke said, then temporarily. "Duke." "Alexander," he corrected gently. She blinked. "Alexander." He nodded once. "Yes," Eleanor swallowed. "Alexander," she tried again, the name unfamiliar and intimate on her tongue. "This is too much." "Is it?" he asked. "Yes." "Then allow me to reduce it." He gestured toward the door. "No visitors, no obligations, no expectations." Her breath caught. "No one will demand anything of you here," he continued. "Not gratitude, not obedience, not silence." Eleanor's voice trembled. "And what if I disappoint you?" His expression turned serious. "Then you will disappoint me honestly," he said, "which is infinitely preferable to pleasing everyone else while disappearing yourself." She laughed weakly. "You speak dangerously well." "I am practiced," he replied dryly. "London exhausts me." She studied him, really studied him, for the first time, the faint lines of weariness around his eyes, the tension he carried as though born with it. "You are unhappy," she said softly. He exhaled. "Yes." The honesty startled them both. "Society places men like me on pedestals," he continued, "and then punishes us for stepping down." Eleanor smiled faintly. "I have always wondered what the view was like from up there." "Lonely," he admitted. "And terribly dull." She laughed then, quietly, genuinely. The sound seemed to please him far more than it should have. He stood. "You will sleep," he said. "I will return later." She hesitated. "Will you?" He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I promised you protection," he said. "I do not break promises." When he left, Eleanor sank back into the pillows, her thoughts spinning faster than her body could manage. She slept again, and dreamed not of disgrace or abandonment, but of hands steadying her when she faltered, and eyes that saw her not as a liability, but as a choice. She awoke to voices in the corridor, sharp ones, accusatory. Her door was closed, but sound carried. "You had no right," a woman hissed. "I had every right," the Duke replied coolly. This will ruin you. It will inconvenience me, he corrected, which is not the same thing. Eleanor's heart raced. A visitor. A woman. You are hiding her, the voice continued. Do you know what they are saying? I am counting on it. Eleanor sat up, ignoring the protest of her head. The door opened. The Duke of Ravensford entered first, followed by a woman Eleanor recognized at once, her mother. Lady Whitcomb stood rigid, gloved hands clenched, eyes blazing with restrained fury as she took in the room, the bed, the warmth, the undeniable care. Eleanor, her mother said coldly. There you are. Eleanor's spine straightened. Mother, she replied evenly. We have come to retrieve you, Lady Whitcomb continued. You have embarrassed us enough. The Duke stepped forward. She will not be leaving, he said calmly. Lady Whitcomb's eyes flashed. This is a family matter. No, he replied. This is a human one. Eleanor's breath caught. Her mother scoffed. She made her choices. And paid for them excessively, the Duke said. I will not allow further punishment. Eleanor's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. I am not returning, she said. Her mother stared at her, stunned. You ungrateful. I am tired, Eleanor interrupted quietly, of being ashamed for trusting someone. Silence followed, thick, shocking. The Duke glanced at Eleanor, pride unmistakable in his eyes. Lady Whitcomb's lips pressed thin. You will regret this, she said. Eleanor met her gaze. Perhaps, she replied. But it will be my regret. Her mother turned sharply and left. When the door closed, Eleanor's knees nearly gave out. The Duke was at her side instantly. You were magnificent, he murmured. She laughed shakily. I nearly fainted again. He smiled. I would have caught you. Their eyes held too long, too intense. Something shifted, subtle, undeniable, and somewhere beyond the walls of Northbridge House, London began to whisper. One must wonder, dear listener, when a woman is humiliated by her family, rescued by a duke, nursed under his roof, and defended against her own blood, is it scandal, or is it the beginning of redemption? Do tell me, should Lady Eleanor have returned to her family, or was she right to choose herself? I await your thoughts with the greatest interest. London, when it chose to be cruel, rarely bothered with originality. By the second morning of Lady Eleanor Whitcomb's stay at Northbridge House, the whispers had already begun their careful migration, from breakfast tables to carriage windows, from gloved hands to lips practiced in false concern. Eleanor knew this not because anyone told her, but because silence, once broken, never truly returns. She stood by the tall window of the morning room, watching frost cling stubbornly to the garden hedges below. The house was awake now. Footsteps echoed softly, fires crackled. Life continued with an unnerving normality that felt undeserved. She wore a simple gown, soft grey, modest, unassuming, one of the dresses the Duke had provided. It fit her perfectly, which was somehow the most unsettling part of all. You are scowling at the roses, a voice said behind her. They will not recover from the insult. Eleanor startled, then exhaled as she turned. Alexander Blackwood, Duke of Ravensford, stood in the doorway, holding a folded newspaper like a weapon he had chosen not to wield. I was not scowling, she replied stiffly. I was considering dangerous pastime, he said lightly, particularly before breakfast. She crossed her arms. I imagine London has already decided I am your secret disgrace. He stepped closer, unfazed. London has decided you are far more interesting than you were yesterday, he said, which is a significant improvement. That is not reassuring. It was not meant to be, she sighed. They will think the worst. They always do. And you, she added quietly, will pay for it. He studied her for a moment, then smiled, not flippant, not careless, but certain. "Eleanor," he said, "I have paid far greater prices for far lesser causes." Her heart thudded traitorously. He gestured toward the small table set near the fire. "Come, eat." "I am not hungry. You fainted 2 days ago," he replied. "Your opinion on hunger is currently invalid." She huffed, but obeyed, settling into the chair with reluctant grace. As she lifted a spoonful of porridge, she hesitated. "You are unusually attentive," she said. "Am I?" "Yes. That is unfortunate," he replied. "I was hoping to be subtle." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" He leaned back in his chair. "Because attentiveness is often mistaken for intention." "And is it?" He met her gaze steadily. "Yes." The spoon froze halfway to her lips. "Oh," she said faintly. He took a sip of tea, entirely too calm for someone who had just altered the trajectory of her morning, and possibly her life. They ate in silence after that, not awkward, charged. Eleanor became aware of small things. The way he noticed when she favored her left side, the way he slowed his movements when she seemed overwhelmed, the way servants deferred to her without question. No one looked at her with pity. No one treated her as fragile. If anything, she was being honored. It unsettled her deeply. After breakfast, Alexander rose. "I must attend to matters in the city," he said. "You will remain here." She bristled. "I am not a prisoner." "No," he agreed. "You are a woman London would like to devour." She opened her mouth to protest. "And I," he continued calmly, "am not in the habit of offering my guests to wolves." Her protest died. He hesitated at the door, then turned back. "There is a ballroom rehearsal this evening," he added. Her pulse spiked. "A rehearsal?" "For a charity musical," he explained. "Harmless, boring, perfectly respectable." "And why," Eleanor asked suspiciously, "do I feel this is a trap?" He smiled. "Because you are perceptive." She stared. "You will attend," he said. "With me." Her breath caught. "I cannot." "You can," he replied. "And you will." "I will be watched." "Yes." "I will be judged." "Certainly." "I will be whispered about, relentlessly." She stood. "Then I refuse." Alexander stepped closer. "You left your home in silence," he said quietly. "Do not let them teach you to disappear again." Her throat tightened. "This is not about proving anything," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "It is about reclaiming space." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not arrogance, but resolve. "When society believes it has broken a woman," he continued, "it expects her to hide. Tonight you will be seen. And if I cannot bear it," he softened, "then I will bear it with you." Her resolve wavered. He extended his hand, not commanding, not urgent, inviting. She took it. That afternoon, Eleanor stood before a mirror while 2 maids adjusted the final touches of her gown. It was pale blue, soft, elegant without excess. She barely recognized herself. "You look like a duchess already," one maid murmured. Eleanor shook her head. "No, I look like someone pretending." The maid smiled knowingly. "So do most of them." The ballroom at Northbridge House glowed with candlelight and quiet anticipation. Musicians tuned their instruments. Guests gathered in small clusters, voices hushed, not respectful, but curious. Eleanor felt every eye the moment she entered. The whispering began at once. "There she is. Is that Ravensford's guest?" Bold of him. Alexander's arm was steady beneath her hand. "Breathe," he murmured. She did. They moved through the room with deliberate calm. Eleanor felt exposed, but not alone. Then she saw him, her former fiancé, standing near the musicians, smug and untouched by disgrace. Her stomach dropped. Alexander felt the change instantly. "You know him," he said quietly. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "Do you wish to leave?" She hesitated. No, no, she said, surprising herself. I wish to dance. A slow smile curved his mouth. Then I am honored. The music began. Alexander led her onto the floor with unhurried confidence. His hand rested at her back, warm, grounding. Eleanor focused on the steps, on the rhythm, on not collapsing beneath the weight of old wounds. You are trembling, he murmured. I know. Look at me. She did. You are not that girl anymore, he said softly. They do not own you. The words settled deep. As they turned, she caught her former fiancé's gaze. He stared, for the first time, uncertain. Eleanor lifted her chin. She smiled, not at him, at the man holding her. Something inside her shifted, subtle, irrevocable. The music ended. Applause followed, polite, curious, unavoidable. Alexander leaned close. Well done, he whispered. London will talk for weeks. She let out a shaky laugh. I may faint again. I would catch you, she believed him. But as they left the floor, a servant approached. Pale. My lord, he said quietly. There is a letter. Alexander frowned. From whom? From Whitcomb House. Eleanor's breath caught. Alexander glanced at the seal, then looked at her. They are not finished, he said. Neither, Eleanor realized, was she. The letter lay unopened between them like a challenge. Eleanor stared at the familiar seal, her family's crest pressed into red wax, with a mixture of dread and defiance. She had thought herself finished with that house, with its corridors of judgment, with the polite cruelty that passed for concern. Apparently, the feeling was not mutual. Alexander broke the silence first. You are not obliged to read it, he said evenly. Eleanor lifted her chin. If I do not, they will only find another way to speak. He inclined his head. Then do so here, where you are not alone. She glanced at him, grateful despite herself, and reached for the letter. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she broke the seal. The words inside were precise, measured, devastating in their restraint. Eleanor, your absence has been noted. The circumstances of your departure have given rise to regrettable speculation. It is expected that you return at once to resolve this matter discreetly. Your presence elsewhere invites further disgrace. Your mother. No apology, no concern, only expectation. Eleanor folded the letter carefully, as though neatness might keep it from cutting deeper. They wish to retrieve me, she said softly. Not because they miss me, because I am inconveniently visible. Alexander's jaw tightened. They presume you will comply. She laughed, quiet, brittle. They always have. He studied her, eyes searching not for weakness, but resolve. And will you? He asked. Eleanor hesitated, not because she wished to return, but because the habit of obedience is a difficult thing to shed. I do not know how to refuse without becoming the villain, she admitted. Alexander leaned closer. You have already been cast in that role. She met his gaze. Then perhaps, she said slowly, it is time I learned how to play it well. Something warm and dangerous sparked between them. He smiled. I find I am very much looking forward to that performance. By afternoon, Northbridge House buzzed with preparation. Alexander had insisted, gently but firmly, that Eleanor not be hidden away. Instead, she was to receive visitors, carefully chosen ones, respectable, observant. Visibility, he explained, is the most effective antidote to rumour. Eleanor suspected he also enjoyed orchestrating London like a chessboard. The first caller arrived promptly at 4. Lady Penrose, an older widow with sharp wit and sharper eyes, swept into the drawing room with the air of someone who had survived 3 scandals and learned to enjoy them. "My dear," Lady Penrose said, clasping Eleanor's hands warmly, "you look alive." Eleanor blinked. "Is that unusual?" "Entirely," the woman replied cheerfully. Most young ladies in your position prefer to wilt, Alexander observed from near the fireplace, faint amusement playing at his lips. Lady Penrose's gaze flicked to him. You are enjoying this far too much, Ravensford. I assure you, he replied, I am merely facilitating. She hummed. You always did enjoy rescuing lost causes. Eleanor stiffened. Lady Penrose caught it at once. Oh, hush, she said briskly. I meant society's opinion, not the girl. Eleanor exhaled. Good, Lady Penrose continued, patting her hand, because society is often wrong and usually dull. Tea followed. Conversation flowed. Laughter even appeared, light and unexpected. Eleanor felt herself relax just a little. Then another visitor arrived, and another. By evening, the whispers had shifted tone. Curiosity replaced condemnation. Interest edged out pity. Alexander watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. You see, he murmured as they stood near the window later, you do not vanish when others look away. You remain. Eleanor nodded. I feel as though I have been underwater for years, and only now remembered how to breathe. He turned toward her, expression intent. You are learning, he said, and you are brave. She smiled faintly. I do not feel brave. Most courageous people never do. Later that night, Eleanor found herself unable to sleep. The house had gone quiet again, safe, warm, impossibly still. She rose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and wandered into the library. Candles burned low. Books lined the walls like patient confidence. She had always loved libraries. They asked nothing. She reached for a volume, then froze. Alexander sat at the desk, sleeves rolled, spectacles perched low on his nose, papers spread before him in controlled chaos. He looked up. Ah, he said, you too. I could not sleep, she admitted. Nor could I, he replied. The city grows louder when it believes it has been outmaneuvered. She approached, curiosity winning over propriety. What are you doing? Anticipating, he said. She glanced at the papers. Names, invitations, seating arrangements. You are planning something, she realized. He smiled. I always am. She hesitated. Does it involve me? He studied her for a moment, really studied her. Yes, he said simply. Her pulse quickened. Should I be alarmed? Probably, he admitted, but not frightened. She sat opposite him, heart racing. Tell me. He leaned back. There will be a ball, he said, at Whitcomb House. Her breath caught. They would never. They will, he interrupted, because they believe it will allow them to reclaim control. And you, she asked. And I will attend, he said. With you. Eleanor's hands clenched. That would be war. His gaze sharpened. It would be clarity, she swallowed. They will expect me to beg forgiveness. He shook his head. They will see you chosen. Her heart thundered. Chosen, she echoed. Yes, he said softly. By me. Silence stretched between them, charged, trembling. Alexander, she began, uncertain. This would bind us together in ways. I am aware, he said. And if I falter, she whispered. If I am not strong enough, he rose, moving around the desk until he stood before her. Then you will falter with me, he said quietly, and I will not let you fall. She looked up at him, at the certainty in his eyes, the steadiness she had never known. Something inside her shifted, deep and irrevocable. Why are you doing this? She asked again, needing the truth now. He hesitated. Just a breath. Because I have watched you be diminished, he said. And I will not allow it to continue. Her voice trembled. That sounds dangerously like affection, he finished. She nodded. Yes, he said, it is. Her breath caught. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the calm authority that had become her anchor. "I will not touch you without permission," he added softly, "but I would very much like to stand beside you." Eleanor's heart pounded. She nodded. "Stand," she whispered. He smiled, slow, reverent. They stood there together, the library holding its breath. And somewhere across the city, plans were being laid, because Whitcomb House had decided it was time to reclaim its wayward daughter, and Alexander Blackwood had decided something else entirely. If Whitcomb House believed it was summoning a contrite daughter, it had gravely underestimated both time and consequence. The invitation arrived the following morning, delivered with ceremonial promptness and wrapped in civility so pristine it nearly glowed. Eleanor recognized the hand at once, her mother's precise script, every letter disciplined into obedience. A family ball, it announced, an evening of reconciliation. Eleanor read it twice, then once more, as if repetition might soften the edge of intent. "They wish to stage forgiveness," she said quietly. Alexander stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, gaze fixed on the city beyond. They wish to reclaim the narrative. She folded the card carefully. "They will expect repentance. They will receive composure," he replied, "which is far more unsettling." Eleanor looked up at him. "You make it sound like strategy." He turned, one brow lifting. "It is." Her mouth curved, nervous, then steadier. "You enjoy this." "I endure it," he corrected. "But I'm very good at it." The days leading to the ball passed with deliberate calm. Alexander insisted on routine, breakfasts taken together, afternoons spent reading or walking in the winter garden, evenings in the library where conversation meandered from politics to poetry to the subtle hypocrisies of London life. It was there, in the ordinary cadence of shared hours, that Eleanor felt the most unmoored. Kindness, she learned, could be disorienting. He noticed when she tired and adjusted without comment. He listened, truly listened, when she spoke, never rushing her words or finishing them for her. He teased her gently when she apologized too often, arching a brow and saying, "Careful, you are apologizing for existing again." She learned his habits in return. He took his tea strong. He despised idle cruelty and adored clever conversation. He possessed a dry wit that emerged most unexpectedly, often at moments when Eleanor least expected to laugh and needed it most. "You are smiling," he observed one evening as she set aside a book. "Am I?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "You do it when you forget to be careful." The realization startled her. Careful. She had been that for so long. On the morning of the ball, Eleanor woke with a familiar tightness in her chest. The mirror reflected a woman composed but pale, her eyes shadowed not by exhaustion, but anticipation. Mrs. Dalrymple entered with quiet efficiency. "The gown has arrived, my lady." Eleanor hesitated. "Which one?" "The one His Grace selected." That did not help. When the dress was revealed, ivory silk, cut with elegance rather than extravagance, Eleanor's breath caught. It was neither ostentatious nor meek. It did not beg for approval. It announced presence. "You look," Mrs. Dalrymple said gently, "as though you belonged to yourself." Eleanor swallowed. That would be new. Alexander waited in the antechamber when she descended the stairs. He turned at the sound of her footsteps and stopped. Not dramatically, not rudely, but entirely. Eleanor's pulse skidded. "Well," she asked, attempting lightness. His voice came softer than she expected. "You are extraordinary." Heat rose to her cheeks. "You are biased." "I am," he agreed without hesitation, and increasingly proud of it. He offered his arm. She took it. Together they entered the carriage. Whitcomb House glowed with light and expectation. The ballroom buzzed with a careful kind of excitement, the kind reserved for events where something might go terribly wrong and everyone hopes to be there when it does. Eleanor felt the gaze of the room the moment she entered. Whispers rose like a tide. "There she is, with him, Ravensford." Alexander's arm tightened just enough to steady her. "Eyes forward," he murmured. "You owe them nothing." They crossed the room. Her mother stood near the hearth, posture rigid, expression controlled. Her father hovered nearby, eyes darting as though already calculating outcomes. Eleanor stopped before them. "Mother," she said evenly. "Eleanor," her mother replied. "You look... well, thank you." The pause stretched. Alexander inclined his head politely. "Lady Whitcomb." "Your Grace," her mother said, smile strained. "This is unexpected." "I find the most interesting things are," he replied pleasantly. Music swelled. Guests watched. Her mother's gaze flicked between them. "We had hoped this evening might allow for healing." Eleanor breathed. "Yes," she said, "I have found some." The words landed with quiet force. Her mother stiffened. "Shall we?" Alexander asked, already turning toward the dance floor. He did not wait for permission. They danced. The steps were simple. The effect was not. Eleanor felt the room recede as Alexander guided her, unhurried, attentive, present. His hand at her back was steady. His gaze never left her face. "You are doing wonderfully," he murmured. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Excellent," he replied. "That means it matters." She laughed, soft and surprised. As they turned, she caught her former fiancé watching from the edge of the floor, his expression tight with disbelief. Eleanor did not flinch. She lifted her chin, and for the first time, she did not feel the need to prove anything. When the dance ended, applause followed, polite, curious, unavoidable. Alexander leaned close. "May I be immodest?" She smiled faintly. "I suspect you will be regardless. I have every intention of asking you to remain at Northbridge House," he said quietly. "Publicly." Her breath caught. "Not as a guest," he added, "as my intended." The world tilted. "Alexander." "Not tonight," he continued. "I will not rush you, but soon." She searched his face, found no pressure there, only invitation. "I need time," she whispered. "You shall have it," he said. "And my patience with it." Across the room, Lady Whitcomb watched, eyes sharp, calculations unraveling. She approached. "This is becoming unseemly," her mother hissed softly. Eleanor met her gaze. "No," she replied. "This is becoming honest." Her mother recoiled as if struck. Eleanor turned away. She did not look back. Later, in the quiet of the carriage, Eleanor exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for years. "You did not ask forgiveness," Alexander observed. "No," she said. "I asked myself instead." His mouth curved. "I approve." She laughed, then sobered. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The attention, the scandal." He took her hand. "I regret not doing it sooner." The carriage rolled on, London whispering in their wake. Eleanor leaned back, heart unsteady but hopeful. She had walked into Whitcomb House prepared to be diminished. She had left it, chosen. London had decided two things by morning. First, Lady Eleanor Whitcomb was no longer invisible. Second, the Duke of Ravensford was no longer bored. Neither conclusion pleased society in the slightest. Eleanor discovered this over breakfast, when the newspaper Alexander had attempted unsuccessfully to hide was delivered with suspicious enthusiasm. "Do not read it," he said calmly, reaching for the teapot with deliberate distraction. Eleanor eyed the folded paper. "That tone has never inspired obedience." It was worth attempting. She opened it anyway. The language was elegant. The implications were not an appearance of reconciliation at Whitcomb House has raised questions regarding the Duke of Ravensford's intentions. Eleanor stopped there. "That is generous," she murmured. They usually accuse first. Alexander poured tea. Give them time. She set the paper aside, fingers steady. I am not ashamed, she said. I know. I'm not frightened either. I know that too. She hesitated. I am uncertain. He finally looked at her then, fully, attentively. That, he said, is entirely reasonable. The days that followed unfolded with a strange duality. Inside Northbridge House, Eleanor was treated with unwavering respect. Servants deferred to her. Invitations arrived addressed directly to her, some sincere, others transparent in their curiosity. Outside its walls, London watched like a cat at a mouse hole. Eleanor learned quickly who wished to be seen with her and who merely wished to be informed about her. You are fashionable now, Alexander remarked dryly one afternoon as Eleanor set aside yet another invitation. She frowned. I find that unsettling. As you should, he replied. Fashion is rarely kind to women. She smiled faintly. You speak as though you have been observing us for some time. I have, he said, with increasing irritation. That evening, Eleanor joined Alexander in the library once more. It had become their place, not by declaration, but by habit. A room where conversation wandered freely and silence felt companionable rather than oppressive. She sat opposite him, curled into the corner of a chair, a book resting forgotten in her lap. You are thinking again, he observed. She glanced up. How can you tell? You do it quietly, he replied. Dangerous, remember. She laughed softly. I was wondering when society stops punishing a woman for surviving. He closed his book. It does not. She blinked. That was honest. Yes. Then why endure it? Because, he said, occasionally one finds something worth enduring it for. Her heart gave a traitorous thud. He did not look away. The following afternoon, Eleanor fell ill again, though this time she did not collapse. Instead, the fever crept in slowly, betraying her with aching limbs and an unsteady warmth behind her eyes. Mrs. Dalrymple noticed at once. You are pale, my lady, she said gently. Eleanor attempted a smile. I'm told it suits me. It does not, came Alexander's voice from behind her. She turned. You hover. Yes, he replied. I have accepted this about myself. She attempted to stand. The room tilted. Alexander crossed the distance instantly, steadying her with practiced ease. You will rest, he said. I can... No, he said softly. You will allow yourself to be cared for. Her protest faded. Being cared for still felt illicit. He guided her to the sofa, tucking a blanket around her shoulders with an attentiveness that made her chest ache. You need not stay, she murmured. I will, he replied. She hesitated. Why? He met her gaze. Because when you are weak, I will not mistake it for inconvenience. Her eyes stung. She looked away quickly. He stayed nonetheless, read to her, adjusted the fire, argued politely with Mrs. Dalrymple over how much broth was necessary. You are treating me like royalty, Eleanor murmured at one point. He smiled faintly. I have always suspected you were. By evening, the fever worsened. Eleanor drifted in and out of awareness, catching fragments of voices, cool cloths against her skin, the steady pressure of a hand holding hers as if anchoring her to the present. At one point, she whispered without realizing it. I'm afraid. Alexander leaned close. Of what? That when I recover, she said faintly, this will all vanish. He tightened his grip just slightly. It will not, he said. I am not kind by accident. Her breathing eased. Later, when she slept more soundly, Alexander remained at her side, papers forgotten, obligations postponed. It was in this quiet vigil that something in him settled into certainty. Eleanor awoke near dawn. The fever had broken. The room felt clearer, sharper. Alexander had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed. one arm draped inelegantly over the armrest, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. She studied him, the Duke, the rescuer, the strategist, the man who had chosen her. Gently, she reached out and brushed her fingers against his sleeve. He stirred. "You are awake," he said immediately. "Yes." "Better?" "Yes." Relief softened his features. "Good," he murmured. "Very good." She hesitated. "Alexander?" "Yes." "Why me?" she asked quietly. He did not answer at once. Then he stood, moved closer, and sat at the edge of the bed. Careful, deliberate. "Because you are brave in a way society cannot forgive," he said. "Because you endured betrayal without becoming cruel. Because you still believe in gentleness after it was used against you." Her throat tightened. "And because," he continued, voice low, "I have spent my life surrounded by admiration that meant nothing, and you have offered me honesty without asking for anything in return." She swallowed. "That sounds dangerously like love," he finished softly. She nodded. "Yes," he said, "it is." Silence followed, heavy, trembling, irrevocable. She searched his face. "I am frightened of loving you. I know. I may disappoint you. I know. I am still learning how to accept kindness. I will wait," he said, "and I will remind you when you forget." Her heart felt too full. "Alexander," she whispered. "Yes." She reached for his hand. "I choose you," she said. "Not because you rescued me, but because you saw me." His breath caught, slowly, reverently. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The kiss was restrained, devastating, and entirely improper. Their quiet was broken by a knock. Sharp, urgent. Mrs. Dalrymple entered, expression grave. "My lord," she said, "there is a caller." Alexander frowned. "At this hour?" "Yes," she replied, "and they are insistent." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Who?" Alexander asked. Mrs. Dalrymple hesitated. "The former fiancé," she said, "and he claims to bring information that will correct a misunderstanding." Alexander's jaw tightened. Eleanor's breath caught. The past, it seemed, was not done demanding attention. Alexander rose, his expression calm but dangerous. "Tell him," he said evenly, "that misunderstandings are rarely corrected by men who created them." Mrs. Dalrymple nodded and turned to go. Eleanor caught Alexander's sleeve. "Wait," she said. He turned back. She straightened, steady now, resolved. "No," she said quietly. "I will see him." Alexander searched her face. "Are you certain?" "Yes," she replied. "I will not be afraid of him again." A pause. Then Alexander nodded. "Very well," he said, "but you will not face him alone." She smiled faintly. "I would not dream of it." As they moved toward the drawing room together, Eleanor felt something unfamiliar but powerful settle in her chest. Not fear, not shame, resolve. And whatever her former fiancé had come to say, this time Eleanor would answer. The drawing room had been prepared for polite company, which made the presence of Mr. Charles Harrington all the more offensive. He stood near the mantel as though he belonged there, gloves in hand, posture practiced, expression carefully contrite. The same expression Eleanor remembered from countless evenings when apologies had been offered only after advantage was secured. He turned as they entered. "Eleanor," he said, voice warm with familiarity he had no right to claim. "You look recovered." Alexander stopped beside her. Not in front, not behind. With her. "That will be all," Alexander said calmly to the footman, who withdrew at once. The door closed. Silence fell, sharp, expectant. Eleanor took a breath she did not know she had been holding. "Why are you here?" she asked. Charles smiled, tight, rehearsed. "I came to set matters right." Alexander's brow lifted. "You arrived unannounced at a duke's residence before noon. That is a curious method of reconciliation. Charles stiffened. I meant with Eleanor. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. You may speak, she said, but choose your words carefully. They no longer belong to you. That unsettled him. Good. I have been misrepresented, he began. The rumors originated with you, Eleanor interrupted quietly. You denied me when it mattered. Charles spread his hands. I was pressured. She tilted her head. By whom? By my family, by society, by consequence, Alexander said coolly. Charles glanced at him, irritation flashing. This is between us. It ceased to be, Alexander replied, the moment you left her to bear your disgrace alone. Charles turned back to Eleanor, desperation creeping in. I loved you, he said. Eleanor did not flinch. No, she replied. You desired me, and when desire required courage, you withdrew. His jaw tightened. You are cruel. She smiled faintly. I am honest. He inhaled sharply. If you return with me, we can end this. Quietly, I will marry you. The words fell like a stone. Eleanor felt the old instinct stir, the reflex to apologize, to soften, to make herself smaller so peace might be restored. She did not indulge it. Why? She asked. Because you regret me, or because you regret losing control of the story? His silence answered for him. Alexander's voice was mild. You should leave. Charles ignored him. Eleanor, think. Society will forgive you if you return properly claimed. Eleanor stepped forward. No, she said. Society will forgive you. Charles blinked. That is how it works. Not any more, she replied. She turned to Alexander. May I? He inclined his head. Always. Eleanor faced Charles once more. You do not want me, she said. You want absolution. I will not provide it. He stared at her, then laughed bitterly. So this is your plan, he sneered. Hide behind a duke until the novelty fades. Alexander's eyes went cold. Eleanor spoke first. I am not hiding, she said. I am standing, and I am done explaining myself to men who mistake silence for consent. Charles looked between them, measuring, calculating. You think this ends well? He asked. You think he will marry a woman with your reputation? Eleanor's breath caught. Alexander stepped forward. Not angry, not loud, certain. I think, he said evenly, that you have overstayed your welcome. Charles scoffed. You would risk everything for her. Alexander did not hesitate. Yes. The word fell with finality. Charles paled. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had carried too long. Goodbye, Charles, she said. You no longer get to define me. He left in silence, not defeated, dismissed. When the door closed, Eleanor's knees trembled. Alexander turned instantly, concern etched across his face. Are you all right? She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed softly, breathless. I think, she said, I may be. He exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. You were extraordinary. She looked at him. You believed me. Of course. No, she insisted. You believed in me? His gaze softened. Yes, he said, I do. She stepped closer, heart pounding. Alexander, I am afraid to ask this. Ask it anyway. If you choose me, she said quietly, you will be choosing my past as well. I know. And London will not be kind. I am rarely kind to London, he replied dryly. She smiled despite herself. And if I falter again? He reached for her hand, thumb warm against her skin. Then we falter together. She swallowed. Stay, she said. Not just beside me, with me. He did not answer immediately. Instead, He lifted her hand, slow, reverent, and pressed his lips to her palm. "I am not a man who rescues women and then abandons them," he said softly. "If I stay, it will be with intention." Her breath hitched. "Then intend me," she whispered. The air shifted, charged, intimate, irrevocable. Alexander leaned closer, stopping just short of impropriety. "Eleanor Whitcomb," he said quietly, "will you allow me to court you?" Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. The word felt like sunlight. That evening, as twilight gathered over London, a carriage departed Northbridge House, not in haste, but purpose. Inside sat Eleanor and Alexander, hands close but not touching, hearts louder than the wheels beneath them. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere public," he replied. "Somewhere visible." She nodded. "You are certain?" "Yes." "And tomorrow?" she asked. He smiled, slow, confident. "Tomorrow," he said. "I intend to be very clear." As the carriage turned onto a well-lit street, Eleanor felt the weight of the city's gaze settle upon her again. But this time, she did not shrink. She lifted her chin, because tomorrow, London would learn something new. And so would she. London awoke the next morning with an appetite. Not for breakfast, no, far more nourishing than that. It hungered for confirmation. By 10 o'clock, every respectable drawing room hummed with the same question, delicately disguised as concern. Was the Duke of Ravensford truly serious, or merely indulging in temporary fascination? Lady Eleanor Whitcomb, quite against her will, was now the centerpiece of that inquiry. She discovered this while standing beside Alexander in Hyde Park, sunlight filtering weakly through bare branches, the gravel crunching beneath the slow procession of carriages that had begun to circle with suspicious frequency. "They are staring," Eleanor murmured. "Yes," Alexander replied calmly. "I instructed them to—" She glanced at him, startled. "You what?" He smiled faintly. "Visibility, remember." Her lips twitched despite herself. "You are enjoying this far too much." "Not enjoyment," he corrected. "Resolution." They walked on, his arm firm beneath her gloved hand. Eleanor felt every gaze, every whisper, every unspoken calculation. But for the first time, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt anchored, a pair of ladies past them, fans fluttering. That's her, with him. How bold! Eleanor's chest tightened. Alexander leaned closer. "Do you wish to turn back?" She inhaled deeply. "No," she said. "I wish to continue." His smile was brief and proud. The luncheon at Lady Penrose's residence was deliberate. Alexander had chosen it precisely because it promised maximum exposure with minimal cruelty. Lady Penrose herself presided with the confidence of a woman who delighted in watching society trip over its own rules. "My dear Eleanor," she said loudly enough to be overheard, "you must tell me, do you prefer lemon or bergamot?" Eleanor blinked, then caught the glint in Alexander's eye. "Bergamot," she replied clearly. "I find it refuses to be ignored." Lady Penrose laughed outright. Excellent answer. Conversation resumed, swirling with careful curiosity. Eleanor noticed how Alexander guided discussions subtly away from scandal and toward substance, her interests, her wit, her insight. She was not being defended, she was being introduced. One gentleman attempted a veiled inquiry. "You have been resting, I hear," he said to Eleanor. She smiled politely. "Recovering, actually." "From?" She met his gaze steadily. Silence. Alexander did not intervene. He did not need to. Later, as they stood near the window overlooking the garden, Eleanor exhaled slowly. "I am doing it," she whispered. "I am surviving." Alexander's voice softened. "You are thriving." She looked up at him. "Do you ever worry that this is too much, that they will turn on you?" He considered the question. "They may," he said, But I am tired of being admired by people who do not listen." Her throat tightened. "And what of me?" she asked. "What if I fail you?" He turned fully toward her now, expression grave. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "the only way you could fail me would be by disappearing again." She shook her head. "I do not know how to be chosen." His hand closed gently over hers. "Then let us learn together." That evening, Northbridge House received guests once more. This time, Eleanor did not retreat. She stood beside Alexander at the top of the stairs as names were announced, her posture steady, her expression composed. She was not introduced as a curiosity, she was introduced as a presence. Whispers followed, yes, but so did respect. At one point, Eleanor caught sight of her mother at the edge of the room, rigid and pale, realization dawning too late. This time, Lady Whitcomb did not approach. Eleanor did not chase her. Alexander leaned close. "Are you all right?" Eleanor nodded. "I am free." The word startled them both. They moved through the room, conversation flowing easily now. Eleanor laughed, truly laughed, at one of Alexander's dry remarks, surprising herself with how natural it felt to be light. Later, near the fireplace, Alexander grew uncharacteristically still. "Eleanor," he said quietly. "Yes, I intend to make an announcement." Her heart skipped. "Tonight?" "Yes." She searched his face. "And if I am not ready?" He did not hesitate. "Then I will not." Her chest warmed painfully. "Alexander," she whispered, "I am ready, but frightened." He smiled softly. "Then you are perfectly prepared." He raised his glass. The room hushed. "My friends," Alexander said calmly, his voice carrying without effort, "I will not indulge rumor with mystery." Silence sharpened. "I have chosen to court Lady Eleanor Whitcomb," he continued, "openly, respectfully, with every intention of honor." A ripple passed through the room. Alexander glanced at Eleanor, not possessive, not demanding, inviting. She stepped forward. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "I have been silent long enough," Eleanor said. "I will not apologize for being seen." The moment held. Then applause, polite at first, then sincere. Alexander's gaze never left her. And so, dear listener, one must ask, when a woman who has been shamed refuses to vanish, when a duke chooses her not in secrecy, but in light, when silence is replaced with dignity, who truly has lost? Tell me, should Lady Eleanor have remained cautious? Or was courage her only salvation? Do leave your thoughts. Society, after all, thrives on opinions. Later that night, in the quiet of the library once more, Eleanor leaned against the window, city lights blinking beyond the glass. "I spoke without trembling," she said softly. "I never do that." Alexander stood beside her. "You did beautifully." She turned to him. "What happens now?" His gaze was warm, certain. "Now," he said, "we stop asking permission." Her breath caught. He reached for her hand, not hurried, not restrained, intentional. And when he kissed her then, slow, careful, reverent, it was not the kiss of rescue. It was the kiss of choice. And somewhere in London, 1,000 assumptions quietly collapsed. London did not sleep easily that night. It never does when its certainties are challenged. By morning, the city had reached its verdict, not unanimously, not gracefully, but inevitably. The Duke of Ravensford was serious, and Lady Eleanor Whitcomb was no longer available for dismissal. Eleanor discovered this, not through gossip, but through something far more dangerous. Peace. She woke in Northbridge House with sunlight touching the curtains and a calm so unfamiliar it startled her. For the first time in as long as she could remember, there was no immediate dread waiting at the edge of her thoughts, no rehearsed apologies, no quiet shame demanding acknowledgement, just stillness. She dressed slowly, choosing her gown herself this time. Pale cream. Simple, confident, a woman's choice, not a strategy, not a disguise. When she entered the breakfast room, Alexander was already there, standing by the window, reading correspondence with a faint scowl. "Good morning," she said. He turned instantly, the scowl vanishing. "Good morning," he replied. "London has opinions." She smiled. "I assumed it would." He crossed the room and offered her tea, his fingers brushing hers briefly, intimate, restrained, entirely deliberate. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. He did not pretend to misunderstand. "No," he said at once. "Do you?" She considered the question carefully. She thought of humiliation, of silence, of leaving her home with a single small case and a heart that believed it deserved nothing more. Then she thought of warmth, of being believed, of choosing and being chosen in return. "No," she said, "I regret only how long I believed them." Alexander's gaze softened. The proposal, when it came, was not dramatic. There were no witnesses, no speeches, no declarations meant for anyone but her. It happened that afternoon, in the winter garden, where pale light filtered through glass and green leaves dared to grow despite the cold. Eleanor stood near a rose bush that refused to wilt, studying its stubborn bloom. "You admire resilience," Alexander observed. "I admire refusal," she replied. "It refuses to die." He nodded. "So do you." She turned, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "Eleanor," he said, reaching into his coat, not hurried, not rehearsed. "I will not offer you rescue because you no longer need it." Her breath caught. "I will not promise perfection," he continued, "nor a life free from scrutiny. London does not forgive easily, and neither does the past." He knelt not as a performance, but as a choice. "But I will promise this," he said quietly. "You will never again be made to feel small in my presence. You will be heard. You will be honored. You will be loved without condition." Tears blurred her vision. "Alexander." "Marry me," he said. "Not because you were rescued, but because you have chosen to stand." Silence followed. Not the old silence. This one was full. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." He rose and kissed her, not hurried, not restrained now, but tender and certain. And in that moment, Eleanor understood something she had never been taught. Love was not something she had to earn by enduring pain. Love was something freely given when courage met truth. Whitcomb House received the news 2 days later. Lady Whitcomb fainted. Her father attempted indignation. Neither reaction altered the outcome. Eleanor visited once, on her terms. She stood in the drawing room where she had once been dismissed and spoke calmly. "I forgive you," she said, "but I will not return." Her mother stared, stunned. "You are abandoning us." Eleanor shook her head gently. "No, I am leaving what never protected me." She walked out without anger, without regret, without looking back. The wedding was quiet by London standards, which meant it was attended by precisely everyone. Eleanor walked into the ballroom not as a spectacle, not as a scandal, but as a woman entirely herself. Alexander watched her as though the world had narrowed to a single truth. When they danced that evening, husband and wife, the whispers changed again. This time they sounded like envy. Later, as the night waned and guests departed, Eleanor rested her head against Alexander's shoulder. "I once believed love required suffering," she murmured. He kissed her hair. "Love requires courage. You supplied the rest." She smiled, and for the first time in her life, she did not brace for loss. Some women are not broken by humiliation. They are revealed. Lady Eleanor Whitcomb was shamed by those who should have protected her, silenced by a society that mistakes obedience for virtue, and nearly convinced that love was something to be endured rather than cherished. But courage did what cruelty could not. It taught her to choose herself. And in doing so, she found a love that did not ask her to disappear, only to stand,